I guess real quick, like, what's the elevator pitch for Nirvana the band, the show, for people who maybe aren't aware of it yet?
It's tough to. We always have trouble with that because it seems we normally pitch it based on shows that it's like. So normally we say that it's like watching Flight of the Conchords mixed with the Ali G show. Like normally that's how we phrase it, but really that's not what the show is. I think that's just formally what it's close to. It's about two best friends trying to become famous in a way, but even that is sort of leaving out an entire side of it. So, I mean, your guess is as good as ours, I think, when it comes to what a good sentence to describe this show is, because we struggle with that, and so does our network.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's like I can see how that those two shows would be useful points of reference, just because that's like show about a band trying to get famous, show where the format is based largely on real people's reactions. And like I've seen interviews where you talk about the Dirties and you talk about how using real people who aren't acting is like worth its weight in gold because you just get the realest, truest, like best possible reaction. But I'd love to hear y'all talk about that in regards to comedy, because I think there's something really uniquely funny about real reactions too that like isn't you can't fake at all.
It started like when we first started throwing this idea up on its feet with cameras when we were living together way back in like 2006. And we had this idea for this show. And so when we started filming it, we just kind of did some camera tests and stuff. And we were shooting these scenes. And Matt and I are not like actors. We're not even improvisers. Like we just sort of had our own little inside jokes, but we started trying to act with each other, and a lot of it was pretty bad. But we just kept the cameras rolling. And then when we were watching the footage back, I remember we would just both find the exact same things funny, and oftentimes it was just like what the camera might have, like Matt would be directing me or something, and the camera would be up on my face, and I would be listening, and I would drop all my sense of like acting or me trying to act. And we would just laugh at the sincerity of my face. And so I think it started there when we just sort of realized the sort of currency of letting your guard down. And we started trying to really kind of play into that.
And people in the real world, of course, have their guard down all the time. It may be slightly different in San Francisco or the United States in urban centers at large, but in Canada, for the most part, it's still pretty rare to see somebody on the street shooting something, or to go there first. I think in Canada, it is not the first thing people think when they see Jay and I run up to them and say, "Hey, we're in the middle of this huge story, or we need help getting into the Santa Claus parade, or we're trying to print a gun," or any of the things that we say. At first, they don't think I'm on a TV show, which I think may be uniquely Canadian. Like I think that them giving us the benefit of the doubt and saying, okay, yeah, well, these guys are clearly sincere. They must really want to 3D print a gun. So I will take them at their word and proceed normally. And because of that, and because Jay and I play such, we're playing people who maybe could be real, but for the audience who gets to live with us and see how we live, sort of privately, they can tell we're not, like we're out of our minds. And so to collide that with real people who then take us seriously, I think is very pleasant. Like there's something very funny about justifying the madness that these characters have privately with real people, because they're like, I think in your head, at least in my mind when I watch the show, I want to talk to everybody who's taking them seriously and be like, you don't need to worry. These guys are idiots. Like, stop being afraid of them. It's like you almost feel like you want to telepathically communicate with the real people that we're interacting with. And that, I think that is a rare thing in that.
Good examples of those two things, like what Jay mentioned about letting your guard. There's a scene in the episode The Booking where there's the Now Magazine thing, and Jay like looks to camera and like holds up Now Magazine and is like doing this really sort of jokey commercially bit for Now Magazine, and you're kind of rejecting it, and he's like, I thought we were doing like a Now Magazine thing, and that felt like this moment between you two as like actors and not as characters, but it still kind of works in the fiction of the show in a really cool way. Another one that I think is from the same episode is at the end when you guys have that really heartfelt moment right in front of the Rivoli security guard, and a fourth dude walks up and he's like, this is funny. Is this supposed to be funny? And like I've never in my life seen anything like that on TV before.
Yeah, well, it's because these guys, whether they know it or not, are actually in a TV show, and the world doesn't care. Like the world doesn't know they're in a TV show, and so the
Right.
number of times that we can have that collide and be like, okay, these guys are in a TV show, nobody else knows it, so let's put these guys and their show against the people who don't think that it is a TV show. That's when you get those moments where people are like calling out the artifice of what it is that we're creating.
Yeah, the thing that's really interesting to me too is like I've noticed that I think subtitles are a really quick way to denote that somebody's not in on something, and I don't know why, but the language of that is really interesting to me because as soon as somebody's on screen and what they're saying because they're not mic'd, right, is like subtitle, it just immediately communicates to the audience like this is a real ass person who's like not necessarily in on the bit. Is that something you're like a kind of cognizant of when you're cutting the show?
We fake that sometimes. Sometimes people are wearing mics and we lower their level and subtitle them anyway because we realize that same thing. Oftentimes, I'll give you some good examples from season one. The reporter who comes up to me in the movie theater and says, "Hey, was that your film? Did you sneak that film into the festival?" That guy's runs a famous magazine called CinemaScope, and he's a guy that I like a lot. And he was mic'd, and when we watched the footage, we were like, "Oh, this would be better if we subtitled him and killed his microphone," because it adds so much credibility to it.
It's the same thing with the Kevin Smith scene, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly, great point.
yeah. Another thing that I'm really interested in is like, there, and I don't think it's something that you necessarily write into the show, but like, there's a lot of video game adjacent stuff that feels really authentic. Like the in the Blind Side, there's the moment where you do Iori's laugh from King of Fighters and just say that's from King of Fighters. Like I've seen TV shows do like you would do a Street Fighter reference on a normal sitcom maybe, but you're not gonna like reference that specific win animation. And like same with the Mario Kart scene at the end of I think it's at the end of the booking. Like that stuff feels like it comes from you guys knowing each other since high school and just that's part of the inside joke and the shared language of you two, of Matt and Jay as people.
You're dead on.
You're on it, man. That's it.
Yeah, it's because
That's a joy to hear that hits with you and it resonates the way it does. That's what it's for.
and know that when we put that stuff in the show, specifically like that Iori laugh, like we don't think anybody's ever going to get that. Like that stuff is stuff that we'll improvise for fun because we're like, oh, it's almost like we're sabotaging our own show in a way, where it's like, let's put in references that literally nobody will ever understand at all. And so the fact that people are getting this stuff that we're putting in this small show is really satisfying.
That is awesome to hear. I'm thinking also about like there's all this stuff that you do formally that is so interesting to me. Like I didn't really it was really surreal to me to go from Nirvana the band to show to the Dirties to watching interviews of you guys because I was like, "Oh my god, that's not like my brain had totally bought into the character of Matt Johnson in those movies and in this show, even though there are some differences between them. But you clearly care a lot about like film and form and stuff like that, and you do all this stuff in like one example of a thing you guys do in Nirvana the Band the show that is like super interesting to me is you take a show that's like kind of ostensibly in the sitcom format and you've made it serial for literally no reason. Like the end of every episode leads into the beginning of the next and there's some sort of throwaway thing. Like is that itself a joke that like there's no need for the show to be serial but you made it serial anyway?
Well, because we're always trying to combine comedy and drama. I think if you asked Matt and Jay, the characters, like if the cameraman were to stop and be like, "Hey, so we've been filming you guys for a long time. Do you think this show is a comedy or a drama?" They would say a drama, right? Like they think that they're in a dramatic series. And so, of course, the idea that there is some contiguousness between episodes that are like, of course, it's our lives. Like, of course, there's a causal relationship between what we do today and what happens tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Like that's the filmmakers playing into the idea that these guys think that they're on some great journey. When, of course, anybody looking at them is seeing they're just wasting their time. But again, it's like giving importance to the way kids play and saying, yeah, you guys are just imagining stupid shit and it's all completely consequence free and no matter what you do, the world's not going to change. But to you, it has stakes and it's important and one thing leads to another. And you're the hero of your own story. And that's very much the way Matt and Jay feel.
You guys are you shooting season 2? Are you done shooting season 2? Like, where is your, because you guys have 3 seasons coming, right?
Yeah, I don't know. How far are we into season 2, would you say?
It says right there. We're about, I don't know, a third of the way.
Shooting?
That would be generous too. Of shooting. Yeah. So in completion, we're like, we still have a ways to go, but we have it all mapped out. It's pretty fun taking a look ahead at all the episodes and like some of the arcs that are going to happen. Talking about like serializing the show, there's going to be some moments in these future seasons where you're going to really get a sense of the story building.
Yeah, we're trying to do season-wide arcs in season 3, which is something a lot closer to what we did in the web series. In the web series, we had really, really, really contained and hard arcs that took the characters from one place to another.
But every episode is still going to be a standalone story that has a beginning, middle, end.
Yeah.
Interview you guys all day about specific moments in specific episodes and how they were achieved, and it's hard for me to resist the temptation to just go through all 8 of them. But I guess if I were to hit a few, there's in The Blind Side, there's the scene where you get hit by a car, which is an effects shot, but then immediately after that, you're carted off on a gurney into an ambulance, and then you're in the hospital. Like, was that a real did you call a real ambulance? Like, how much of that is fiction and how much isn't?
Put it this way. The way our office and the way our creative team works often is a lot like a fire hall, where everyone's eyes are very open to seeing opportunities to just grab footage. Mm-hmm. And we're almost like building a library of archive footage of just different things, what we catch on the street. In the web series, like, we wrote an entire episode based on just footage that we got filming a fire that was across from our place.
And we did that same trick in the pilot. Because we're together all day, every day, for the most part, and the place that we shoot is like the Rivoli, and our office, which is also the set, is just a few blocks from one another. Like, if an ambulance pulls out front, we'll go out and film it. Or if a fire truck drives by the Rivoli, like, we'll go film it. Like,
we'll go film us. We have footage of us, running away from a bunch of police that are, going the same direction. And we don't know how we might repurpose that, but it always has proved to be pretty useful.
Yeah, and normally when we get something that we really like, I'll give you an example. In season 2, we have an episode that all takes place at the 420 Weed March, and that was just that a 420 Weed March was happening in Toronto last year, and we went out and shot a bunch of stuff, and we were like, oh, this stuff's really amazing, and so we just turned it into an episode. So it's sort of like a combination of documentary filmmaking with and then writing to it afterwards.
Conversely, I'm assuming there are situations where something happens over the course of shooting that ends up leading to the next thing, like the guy in the library who says you can get your photo taken at Sears. Were you planning on going to Sears as part of this episode, or did that just happen?
Believe it or not, we had shot that scene at Sears before we went to the library.
Wait, really? Was that kid in on it, or did he just happen to say Sears?
It's funny, you say we know that we need to get that out of that kid, and so we're trying to bait him to say it. Okay. But then, like, if you were to watch The Raw, it's quite funny because you watch us like really try to get him to say it. We're like, where is there a place like that? And he's like, I don't know, like anywhere, like a department store maybe has a portrait. Yeah, I don't know, man. And then maybe we even just say, somewhere like Sears, and he goes, oh yeah. Sears? And then we, where? And he goes, Sears? And
then we act like he just said it.
Right.
And that's why if you watch that scene again, you'll see it's quite obvious how we do it, because he says it to us as though it's a question, and he's looking at us like we're crazy. So, like, he's looking up at us like,
you guys are starting to really act bizarre with me now. I thought you were weird at first, but...
Yeah, but public libraries are good places to shoot shows like this, because they're a real... they collect a lot of really tolerant people. There's a lot of tolerance in libraries, and so we've filmed in libraries a lot in season 1, a lot in season 2, and we get away with murder in them because people are just so willing to have a quiet conversation with you.
I have to imagine that the library fee comes back at some point in the future, because we know canonically that Jay's library fee is still growing.
Yeah, at $1 a day.
Yeah, so
According to that woman. Yeah, we'll see what happens with that library fee in season 2. Who knows?
Yeah. Let's talk about the finale, actually, because it just aired last night, and it's probably the most ambitious episode in season 1 of the Viceland series. I think, like, you guys open with a title card on that episode that's different from the rest of the season, which is like, this, like, is real. This happened in Toronto. Like, what's the ratio? Because my sense watching it just from a production perspective is that, like, the ratio of real to fake in that one has to be skewed differently than episodes 1 through 7. Like, how do you, right? So, like, how do you? I assume the crowd outside was a real crowd of people, but, like, what about the bank itself? The like, how did you achieve a real feeling thing in a set that I'm sure must have been at least partially, like, constructed?
Yeah, well, 2 things are happening there. The first is that opening text is actually stolen from the movie Dog Day Afternoon. Okay. That's how the movie Dog Day Afternoon opens, with that exact same text. So that's sort of a formal concession that we're making. You
put out a poster that mirrored it too, right?
Yes, exactly. And the opening credits, like that Elton John song over top of footage of a city, that's how Dog Day Afternoon opens as well. So that was a bit of a concession. I think that Jay and I probably wouldn't ever open an episode with the text, "What you're about to see is true." That's very unlike us, but we did it because we're trying to do this parody as close as possible, and our show always opens with text. And then in terms of how we shot that, of course, there's a whole lot more like us setting it up, and us, like, making sure the bank was right, and working with a lot of good builders, and obviously having, like, the police do what they did. But we shot it in a part of town where we knew there was going to be a huge amount of locals who would come out and just participate in this. So it was us planning to put on a big show that everybody in the real world looking at it would think was real.
And I'm assuming even in those constraints, there are still unexpected moments, like the audience cheering and going wild when it seems like the situation is, like, so weird. Like, I don't think that would happen at a bank robbery, but it ends up being way funnier than anything that would happen in, like, a controlled fictionalized movie.
And you can see it really takes me by surprise. If you listen to my voice, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, all right, yeah, come see the show. Like, I almost can't believe that they're doing it.
You drop the "come see the show."
Yeah, and I say, come see the show, as though this guy's so stupid he's completely dropped his cover. It's like, it's me. I'm in Nirvana the band. His ego is so powerful that he's even willing to destroy the plan at the last second, just so that he can get a split second of gratitude from these people.
It's the closest the character Matt Johnson has ever gotten to getting acknowledgement for Nirvana the band. Like,
of course, real fame. A whole bunch of people clapping.
Yeah, he had a captive audience for, like, the first time ever.
Yeah.
Man, yeah, no, that whole episode was incredible. One thing that was interesting to me is, like, you go 3D print the gun at the library, and there's a guy who tells you can't do it, and then there's this really amazing shot of, like, him and you guys doing it literally behind him, like, over his shoulder. Yeah. And then there's a scene later on in the episode where I was under the impression that you guys were 3D printing, like, a toy thing shaped like a gun, but in the fiction of the show, you shoot the dead robber's head with it, and blood goes everywhere. So I guess you...
That's one little hole that I was just saying to one of our guys today, that, like, hopefully people just assume that Matt picked up one of the robber's guns.
Because it got cut out. Yeah. Like, I actually do take one of the robber's real guns. Like, in like, when we were shooting it, I actually took one of the corpse's handguns, placed it, and left the 3D gun on the ground.
We don't want the people to think that, like, all of a sudden the 3D gun works because we're making this leap.
Gotcha.
But granted, it is, like, I imagine that a lot of people have the interpretation that you had, which is that he 3D printed a working gun, which, I mean, is crazy. But we've been asked that a lot in the last, like, 12 hours.
Makes sense. What is it like? I mean, I get the sense that Viceland has been, like, super permissive, and they aren't giving you a ton of notes on stuff. But I have to imagine there are still some differences between a show that you guys put on your own website and a show that has, like, a legal department fighting for you and, like, fighting for fair use and stuff like that. Has that What has that transition been like? Have there been any like things you really wanted to do, or songs or clips you really wanted to use that they weren't able to clear?
We almost did with the John Cena stuff in the finale. That was the stuff that I know I wanted more than anything in the whole series, and we just got a no from everybody, from the WWE to our lawyers to everybody. It just seemed like that was never going to happen. And that was the only time where it seemed like, oh shit, well, this is the one thing we won't be able to do. But then we got it eventually by rewriting the episode. I think that one thing that has changed in a major way between Jay and I making the show on our own as a web series and now us making it with this huge team is that we're pretty insulated from that really difficult legal work that has to happen. For the most part, we say what we want to have happen, and then the team of people who are in this room right now, you can even see some of them, like these guys out there, sort of all make that happen. So I don't think that it's necessarily it's actually much easier for Jay and I than it was making the web series. So far, I think we're savvy enough to not ask for things that are impossible. Like we don't want to have like the Beatles as score, even though I think maybe we may try to do that one day. But we're good at knowing what we can and can't get, and we've never wanted to. I can't think of something that we've wanted yet that we haven't been able to do.
No, and sometimes it's a fun challenge that we can edit some of the writing, because we're always constantly making the Frankenstein monster to make these episodes come together, the sum of all parts, based on so many rewrites. And sometimes it becomes a fun challenge to be like, oh, well, we are only like one or two little steps away from this being fair use.
Yeah, a good example actually is with the John Cena thing, where we wanted that John Cena thing so badly. I didn't like. I knew that ending of like seeing the different body and then that John Cena theme playing and then seeing those, like, it was just going to be crazy. But we couldn't create a fair use case for it, and so the lawyer said, unless you're willing to go and completely make this guy obsessed with John Cena, this will never work. And so Jay and I were like, yep, let's make him obsessed with John Cena. And so we just rewrote the episode.
So the scene in the library bathroom where you're holding up the gun, which is probably my favorite shot of that episode, because it looks so, just seeing the cameraman peeking through the half-open bathroom door with you holding the gun in the air and yelling about John Cena. First of all, that feels like something that Matt Johnson, the character, would absolutely do, because he's just he just loves corny shit like that. Like, he would of course yell. It's just, it fits so well.
That again is just,
that's a reshoot for the purpose of getting the song,
and that's the fine art of iteration that we just do all the time. Where it's like we try something and a lot of it doesn't work, but the few things that do then inform the next layer that we shoot, and that is a great example of us really falling backwards into a good idea that then creates a legal framework for us to do the thing that we wanted to do in the first place. Yeah. So because we're a small group of friends, and as you say, we have a lot of permission from our distributor, we can do a lot of this really risky shit. And by risky, I mean go out and shoot a whole episode at a bank where we got to spend a whole bunch of money to make it look a certain way, but then not be locked to that story. To then look at it and say, okay, what do we like about this? We could cut all of it if we want. We could have this episode not include a bank if we want, so long as we can figure out a different way to do it, because the things that we say that we're going to do, we're never held to.
Because doing a reshoot on a TV show with high-paid actors and stuff is just
awesome.
You can't do it. And when it's just you two and a camera person, and you just go down to the local library, like, it's the burden is a lot lower. There's other like formal stuff that I kind of want to talk to you guys about too. Like, there's you guys use a lot of like flashback and black and white with the pitch down voices, which is just always immediately funny. And there's at least one moment where you guys like construct a sentence of how Matt is feeling based on the things Jay said.
I play a pretty good Han Solo. You can go as Han Solo. Then you're cool, Mr. Cool.
That's
special.
That's our lead editor. He invented that. I've been saying that he invented a new form of comedy. But as soon as he showed me that, it was in episode 4, and it's when he is basically making Jay misremember what Matt has said, so that Matt is giving him the idea to become Han Solo. Mm-hmm. I'd never seen that before.
It's quite the leap that the show takes to almost get inside my head. But
exactly.
Those are the sort of rules that we love to break.
And when we saw that for the first time, Jay and I were dying. We thought it was the funniest thing ever. And then, so Kurt kept doing it. He did it again in that same episode, and then he does it. Mostly, Jay's subconscious mind is the editors play with it like this. In the Mandarin episode, Jay fuses two sentences together to realize that something was a sign from Jesus. I love that. Jay and I did lots of slow motion black and white back in the web series because, again, it's just so funny. It makes everything funny for some reason. And so we try to do it as much as possible. And also, our show doesn't have the benefit of other characters. It's just Jay and I the entire time. And because of that, we have few things to cut to. Like, we can't actually cut away from the main action. And so to be able to cut to the past as almost a different location or a different moment really helps the edit. Because now all of a sudden we can break up
more
scenes.
Characters.
Yeah, now it's like there's 4 of us as opposed to 2. There's us and there's us in the past. Or there's us and then our own like creation of one another, like we do in the Sundance episode, where Jay is remembering how mean he treated Matt, except in a subjective way. He's subjectively remembering him really screaming at me.
Sneaking around gets you nowhere. What if you have to sneak for a friend? You idiots! Please, I'm sorry. You. Sneaking around is never gonna pay off, you fat.
That's maybe the hardest the show ever made me laugh, because it's like Jay's character is a relatively mild-mannered, meek, and like Matt's kind of the dominant force in it, and so to see him just really give it to you in a way that's totally out of character is like a fucking riot. I'm also fascinated by like the episode that you guys shot at the park, at the theme park at Canada's Wonderland. There's the opening scene. There's the kid you find in the hospital, who is like, I guess I'm curious. What did you find him in the hospital, or was he like how was that constructed? I guess.
Yeah, we found him in the hospital and broke him out and tried. That kid is. We auditioned like a whole bunch of kids to come like be our buddy, and then we brought him to the hospital with us and just put him in that bed. So. Okay. There's no way we were going to actually go steal a kid from sick kid's hospital. It would have been too crazy.
I guess what I loved about him is that he didn't look like the hospitalized kid you would cast in any other TV show. Like, he looked like very real in a way that was totally let me buy into that fiction.
Yeah, well, Jay and I had to fight really hard for that, because that was a hard casting choice. I think the going idea was get somebody who fits the mold of sick kid. But as soon as Jay and I met that guy, Michael is his real name, we were like, this is it.
I didn't even need to look at Matt. He sat down and said 2 things to us, and I just started laughing, and I just
he's
knew,
instantly funny. Yeah.
And he screwed it up too. Like some of the other kids fit what we were looking for so much better.
Well, they could do the lines. We sent them lines like things to audition with. This kid knew nothing. Came in with nothing
tripping
prepared.
over his words. Yeah. Everything, all of his screw ups were just the best.
He also didn't care if he got it or not. Oh yeah, did I get it? Yeah.
Yeah, we heard he was being mean to the other kids in the waiting room, saying like. He was like confident that he was going to get it. He just booked another music video or something.
That guy's in a Drake music video.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kid. Look it up. He plays, I think, young Drake in the video Energy. I might have that wrong, but yeah, check it out.
That's a rare episode where you guys have a third character following you around the whole time, who is I'm assuming is an actor, but like. How do you like Matt as the director direct? Do you just direct him to not act and not say lines? You direct him to be himself, like, or are you guys feeding him lines? Like, what's the balance of telling him to act versus telling him to be him?
I think for the most part, it's Jay and I trying to get through these scenes, and then if we think of something funny for Michael or whoever else we're acting with to say, we'll just sort of pitch it. The thing is, because of how we shoot, because it's like a documentary, we can cut out all of that stuff. A lot of the show is Jay and I talking to one another out of character about what it is that we're going to do or say with other people. So, like, if there's somebody else in the scene, although I can't think of a time we've ever done that other than with Michael in this season. Have we ever had an actor? No. Yeah, so for that episode, we're basically just trying to do our thing, and then if we need Michael to say something, we'll feed it to him. But the good thing is, and what we always strive for, is to have the actual, like, the main action be driven by Jay and I, so that whoever else is around us can just sort of participate without us needing a specific line from them, because that's very hard. The only line reading that he had all episode was at the end when he says, "Can we still be friends?" In the hospital.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
That was the only line where we were like, "Okay, now you got to ask us if we can still be friends." And he really killed that line. It's so sweet. He's got his arms up his head.
We normally don't have to do that sort of like conventional directing. I mean, like usually it's just us looking at each other, and with Jared too, just kind of like all being referees of what's working with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, it's just like Matt has got like just a really great way of quarterbacking, like knowing how to tell the story with a lot of great clarity. You can see it 10 steps ahead. Yeah. But in terms of like acting and directing, it's not like the way shows normally do it. Like
we never stop.
Yeah,
like there's never a break where we're like, okay, let's reflect on what we
direct
just did.
ourselves too. We'll stop. Well, I'm taking that again. I'm going to do that one more time.
Exactly.
Oh, I got a line for you.
And you guys, I mean, the Canada's Wonderland situation specifically, you guys got thrown out of there, is my understanding, right? Was there a temptation to use that stuff, or did it just not fit the story of the show?
Sometimes we run into trouble with that exact same thing where it's like, so I can compare it to episode 4 where we get thrown out of the movie theater, right? And it's so amazing that we get thrown out of the movie theater right at that moment where Matt and Jay are having that argument about being cool. Like that couldn't have worked better. But here, because we needed Michael to die and we needed that to be a major moment, and we love that transition of carrying Michael's body out of the park to the hospital, we couldn't use any of the footage of us being thrown out because it broke us off of that main story. So sometimes we get fucked over that way, but other times we get to use it. So it's always
there's two, and this happens in the original miniseries, which I've found and have been watching some of. Like, there's 2 pivotal scenes in this one that take place outside of the hospital. One that I think of is when you're dropping Michael's body and someone walks by and is just staring, like completely baffled at what's happening. Another one is Jay being like using the devil sticks, and the person on the bike goes by and goes, "Real cool, buddy." Was that a thing that happened, or was that a fabrication?
See, I'm starting to get uncomfortable answering all these.
It's totally fine.
I mean, it's the greatest when we hear that somebody's watching with a whole lot of questions like that, just not quite sure, on the fence. Yeah. That makes us feel really good. That's sort of like, it's a half real thing.
I wasn't there when that happened, so you have to ask Jay.
It's a half real thing. There were a couple people that went by.
Oh, you started by asking if that Asian dad and his kid in the tutu was real, like watching us drop Michael's corpse off. Yeah, that was real.
Another thing that I'm really interested in is like the Blind Side is kind of built around the Star Wars Episode 7 reveal. And I can't imagine a scarier, more litigious company to use footage of than like Disney and Star Wars. But you pulled it off, which I would love to hear about. And then you also do this really incredible thing where the closing scene of that episode is you in the hospital bed with Jay sitting next to you, reading the opening title scroll, and the John Williams score fades from being on the camera into the actual score of the episode, which is another like really cool formal thing that I've never ever, like, you just, in what other format would you ever get to do something like that? It's just fascinating to me. Like, what was your thinking behind using Star Wars, and how psyched were you when you came up with that in the editing room?
We came up with that as writers. We wanted to do that.
I remember thinking about that because it was we wanted to use Blinded by the Light to do
specifically the song. I thought you meant the whole idea of like camming Star Wars and like doing it.
Well, just specifically that end part was sort of like an idea that we just came up with watching the edit, where we had to take away Blinded by the Light because it was just way too expensive and we couldn't fair use it.
But we could fair use the Star Wars song, which we learned from our lawyer. Again, this is our lawyer just saving our ass, where we're being like, well, can we fair use this Manfred Mann song? No. If it was a Star Wars song, you could fair use it. And us going, what? Oh, wicked. Okay, then we'll just use the actual end of the Star Wars theme. And then Kurt, the editor, put it in, and it was like gold.
Able to make it work.
Also, there's a very, very, very small reference that I know Kurt would, well, I don't know if you want people to know about this or not, but
the hands?
The hands.
I know.
At the end of A New Hope, George Lucas, whoever was doing his his, because you know how Lucas does a whole lot of optical fades and things like that, and optical transitions. Well, the optical transition at the very end of A New Hope, when they're all getting their medals,
It's their final shot,
the final shot,
standing with their medals,
and Princess Leia has just given them the medals, and they're all laughing. Well, something happened wrong with the optical printer when they were doing the print of A New Hope, and they actually ran out of film, and so there's like a 3 or 4 frame freeze frame at the end of A New Hope that's not supposed to be there, that nobody talks about, where Princess Leia's hands freeze mid-motion, and Kurt...
It's weird, they're all standing completely still, and Leia's hands, just at the very ending of the thing,
go like this.
Go like this. Whoop.
And so Kurt was so pumped that he was able to do the exact same thing in our show. And so if you watch them both side by side, it will blow your mind how close he was able to get them. My hands come up at exactly the same time.
And Matt didn't know.
Yeah, and I had no idea.
It was just an accident. And so it does the exact same thing. It does the same freeze frame.
So Kurt is going so far as to recreating optical printing errors that nobody has ever mentioned ever in Star Wars A New Hope as a reference in Nirvana the band, because he's like, oh yeah, I think in his mind he's thinking, oh yeah, people will really get this.
Right. Yeah. No, but it really does feel like, and Matt, you don't really have like a huge like social media presence or anything, so I imagine you're not caught in the gratification loop that I am as someone who makes stuff on YouTube of like reading every comment and doing all that stuff. The show feels like it's made for you guys to make each other laugh and to make the editors laugh and just do stuff that satisfies one another. Is that accurate? That's
one of the reasons we're excited to work on it. In fact, if it weren't for that, there'd be no joy in making a show like this, because it's brutal to make.
Well, when I found out there were 2 more seasons coming, I was over the moon. I can't stop showing this show to every person. I had my birthday party on Friday night, and I literally took the 6 friends of mine who I knew would appreciate it most and like made them watch The Blind Side. Like it's getting like unprofessional how much of a fanboy of this show I am. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to talk. I'm super pumped to see you next season.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I've been thinking a lot today. Been thinking a lot.